we are discussing some management concepts, and in the last two lectures in fact, we have discussed number of concepts. Let us continue with familiarizing ourselves with some more concepts which will help us in understanding overall management studies subjects and perspectives. So, from the last lecture we move on to the issue of some of the strategic we can say management concepts. We have a couple of them. So, these strategic alliances. When we are talking of strategic management, we are talking about the strategic alliances. Strategic alliance, this is an agreement between two or more organizations to do business together in a mutually beneficial way. So, strategic alliance enables partners to gain access to each other's resources, including markets, technologies, capital and people. This becomes important in today's world of globalization, competition, that sometimes the organizations start about their alliances. From here we come to the strategic architecture. When we are talking about strategic management, we need to understand this term strategic architecture, which refers to a top management action plan which indicates the new competencies which will be needed in the coming years, in future, and how the existing competencies have to be strengthened, how business processes have to be reoriented, and the relationship with external entities, especially customers and others perhaps. This has to be recognized and refigured. So, we are talking about the strategic architecture, and we have many examples of strategic architecture. For example, when we say that the commitment of people is extremely important, okay, so the top management has to look into that. Perhaps that becomes an element of that this issue. Then we move on to the SBU, what we call as the strategic business unit. Every organization has number of units, and the strategic business unit is known as this is a variation of the divisional structure of an organization. An SBU is an operating unit or division of a corporate group that determines its own strategy, largely independent of the corporate center. Usually the SBU will have its own distinct set of products and services for a customer segment or a geographical region. So, if a company has its head office in Delhi or Mumbai, it may have the various offices, say some remote areas, say in south, west, east, north, anywhere, and then looking at the geographical perhaps regional requirements, there may be certain strategies for business. Then we are discussing the strategic control. Strategic control refers to a defined system to support managers in assessing the relevance of the organization's strategy to its progress in the accomplishment of its goals, and when discrepancies exist to support needing attention. A strategic control system links operations to strategic goals, and it also aligns financial and non-financial information to support business decisions. And we need this in order to have very good business management, particularly again, I will repeat that in today's scenario. Stakeholders. We are talking about in an organization that there are employees, there are stakeholders, there are decision makers. We are talking about all the persons, those who are playing some roles. And stakeholders, when we are talking about this, we mean by stakeholder the groups whose interests are directly or indirectly affected by the company's activities. Stakeholders, employees, managers, creditors, suppliers, contractors, agents, distributors, and customers. The local community can also be considered to be a stakeholder. Management of relationships with stakeholders has become an important and integral part of a CEO's job. This is becoming an important part of what is being popularly referred to as the corporate social responsibility, about which we will be discussing later. Then the issue of strategic fit is coming. The strategic fit is a term which is commonly used in the mergers and acquisitions. The extent to which the activities of two organizations complement each others, and in other words we can say that the potential for generating synergies. The benefits of good strategic fit may include cost reduction due to economies of scale and due to transfer of knowledge and skills. So, we may have this strategic fit where we may share knowledge and we may do lot of sort of implementation, experimentation, and then decide about certain business strategy. Strategic inflection point. This is a point of dramatic change in an industry that is known as strategic inflection point. We are discussing this because in this era of strategic management, we need to acquaint ourselves also with some of these concepts, because that's something we can say additional to the literature of management when we are talking about the strategic management concepts. And so, as I said in my last lecture, the objective of discussing all these is to paint a picture or to present some sort of a view to you, so that you may be able to understand that in terms of management what concepts are becoming more important these days. So, we move on to the strategic intent now. Strategic intent, we mean the leveraging of internal resources, capabilities and core competencies by a firm to accomplish its goals in the competitive environment. We can also say this is a dream that energizes a company by setting stretch targets, providing a sense of destiny, we can say, to the company's employees. So in other words, this is the intent of the organization, in which perhaps we are also involving employees and other members of the organization to actually come to certain decision or certain conclusions. Then coming to the issue of strategic market, a market which scores high on either market potential or learning potential or both for an MNC, multinational corporation. A strategic market demands significant commitment of human and material resources. Then we come to strategic planning. When we are looking at the strategic management, planning is an important aspect of the whole process of managing. So, the strategic planning is the determination of the basic long-term goals and objectives of an organization and adoption of courses of action and the allocation of resources necessary to achieve these goals. So, when we are discussing the strategic planning, this is determination of the basic long-term goals, that's very important, and then we are trying to again when we are doing this long-term goals, we have the strategies where we will involve people in decision making. So, the strategic planning will becomes necessary to achieve the goals of the organization in today's world. From here we move on to talk about a concept called stress. Some of you must be wondering, why are we talking about the stress? The stress, the other day there was a news item which said that the managers perhaps in developing countries are more stressed than many other countries. So, the stress becomes an important aspect when we are looking at the overall managing. So, from that news item, let us see now what do we really mean by stress and its implications. Stress is a dynamic condition in which an individual is confronted with an opportunity, constant, or demand related to what he or she desires and for which the outcome is perceived to be both uncertain and important. That is Robbins has given this definition, and so from there I picked up this. So, we can see that stress becomes an important aspect of managing an organization. So how much of stress and how do we design the work for different levels, that becomes an extremely important. Here we are looking at stress from the point of view of organization aspect. We are not looking at the some of the psychological stress which the individual might have otherwise. We are not talking about that, even though that is also an important aspect for the manager has to understand, if after all the full we are looking at the work family interface also these days, and that balancing work and family relationship, that also we are talking about these days. So, if a person is under stress even at home, that stress he might sometimes carry to the place of work. But here the more reference for us is to at the place of work how do we design the working system, that is the reference here. From here we move on to succession planning. It refers to the process of identifying and preparing people for assuming greater responsibility. It assumes that vacant positions are filled smoothly, and CEO level succession planning is a challenging task. So we have to see that how the succession planning has to be done, keeping in view various parameters. So these parameters the CEO has to actually look into in terms of the many aspects, like the time factor, the availability of people in the market, the expertise available, and perhaps what are the goals that we have to achieve, and so on. In this issue, the CEO's role becomes an extremely important function perhaps. So from here we are moving to the issue of supply chain management. In the recent years, one of the important management concepts that has emerged is about the supply chain management. This is an emerging school of thought, we can say, which lays emphasis on taking an integrated view of the entire value addition process, stretching from suppliers to customers, and from customers to customers, we can say. And it refers to the flow of materials from the primary sources through various stages to the final user, final customer. So how the whole supply chain actually is functioning, that becomes very important for us in the overall business scenario. And otherwise, sometimes one might think that we are producing very good things, but then that's not enough. We have to see the supply chain aspect and how do we design that aspect. So from here we move to a very important aspect of management. In fact, you would recollect that when we were talking about the whole introduction of the concept of management studies in our earlier lectures, one of the objectives or one of the goals that we were discussing was that we must have the quality and productivity in terms of the performance of the organization. So if we are producing something and if there is no quality in that, then we may be producing any lot. It cannot sustain in the market. So in order to really achieve the good profits and the competitive advantage, we need to have the quality. And so the movement of total quality management that has come up, and which is now there in all spheres of the management system. It's not only in the production management, and we call it TQM, or the total quality management. Total quality management is the integration of the functions and the processes within an organization in order to achieve continuous improvement in the quality of goods and services. So TQM represents a new approach to quality, and as we will see that the total quality management is a systems approach that considers interactions between the various elements of the organization. The subsystems of the organizations include design, planning, production, distribution, field services, and various management services. From here we are again looking at some few other aspects of the total quality management. Total quality management also believes that there is a scope for continuous improvement in any of the product, processes or services. Remember, if we are also talking about services in the total quality management. So, that means the expectation of the buyer is that in everything there has to be a quality, whether it is a product or the services. A basic notion of total quality management is that quality is essential in all functions of business, and external and the external factors. Well, it is not correctly written. Implementing total quality management involves a cultural shift and change in behavior of employees, and total quality management, if implemented effectively, leads to lower costs, improved productivity and competitive advantage in the long run. So, what we are seeing, the total quality management as a movement has become an extremely important concept for us, and all of us, wherever we are, we have to see that we have achieved the best quality in whatever we do, and that actually is the success of managing. After discussing total quality management, now we discuss value chain. Let us see what is the meaning of value chain. Value chain is a framework for analyzing the various activities a firm performs to add value for its customers. By analyzing the value chain, the firm can understand where it is strong and of course, where it is weak, and how it can further streamline the value addition process. Every organization has a value chain, and this becomes an important concept for us for organizational functioning. Now, we move on to goal setting theory. Goal setting theory is part of the motivation process, and this theory states that specific and difficult goals with goal feedback lead to higher performance. Yes, this is one of the important theories in the motivation literature of motivation, work motivation. And this also relates to job design or work design. And work design we understand as the allocation of specific work tasks to individuals and groups. Then we are talking about job enlargement. In fact, goal motivation, the goal setting and work motivation and job enlargement, these are all aspects of the motivation, the concept of motivation. Job enlargement, this is actually part of one of the theories of job design, when we are talking about a strategy that increases task variety by combining into one job two or more tasks that were previously assigned to separate workers. Job enlargement. Suppose there is a car manufacturing company and there are workers in the assembly line, and earlier every person was supposed to put perhaps only the some nut and bolt in the assembly of door of the car. So, for various jobs there were various persons, Now, when we say job enlargement, that means the whole door assembly is done by the same person. So, his job is enlarged in terms of number of responsibilities that we might give him. So, 2 or more tasks are there which are enlarging. So, it was found that if you enlarge the job of people by giving more responsibility, perhaps there is greater intrinsic motivation, and so this finds a place in our understanding of work motivation and the management process. As against job enlargement, we have job enrichment, where we are trying to enrich the job in terms of the quality of job. And job enrichment, when we do our lectures on motivation, you will find that we are talking about Herzberg's theory, and this is an outcome of that theory, and job enrichment refers to vertical expansion of job, which has number of characteristics which will make the job enriching. And the number of characteristics that we are talking about, well, I will just mention the characteristics short while from now. Job enrichment increases the degree to which the workers control the planning, execution and evaluation of his or her own job. And the characteristics of job also increase employee freedom and independence, responsibility, and provide feedback to assess the correct performance. We are talking about job enrichment. In fact, later we will see Herzberg's theory, which is also known as job enrichment theory, one of the names used for job for Herzberg's theory. So, we will see that in details. I am just trying to acquaint you to the concepts of management in these lectures. So, the job enrichment theory has number of aspects which are also related later on to the job characteristics theory. We are talking about the variety, the various types of skill, variety, the kind of a feedback that you have, all these things as part of job enrichment process. Job analysis is yet another concept that we use mainly in the literature of HR when we are trying to recruit people or allocate job to people. So, job analysis means developing a detailed description of tasks involved in a job, determining the relationship of a given job to other jobs, and ascertaining the knowledge, skill and abilities necessary for an employee to perform the job successfully. So, in fact, many a times we first do job analysis, and this is a process for every job analysis, so that we can have the best kind of a person work fit for the organization. Then very closely related to this process is the process of job description, and job description is a written statement of what a job holder does, how it is done and why it is done. Yes. Job specification is a process that states the minimum acceptable qualifications or attributes that an employee must possess to perform a given job successfully. That is the job specification. If you want to become a teacher, then what are the special acceptable qualification and the attributes which are required? Say you have to be a PhD and you should be liking to teach and speak, communicate, meet people, okay, patient and so on. Okay, so like that there are every job has such certain job specifications. For example, communication may not be very important if you are just working at the shop floor in a big way, even though we all understand communication is a good skill that may be required for most of the jobs, but okay, when you are teaching perhaps more requirement of this attribute. So, very closely related to the motivational models or job enrichment model that we have discussed earlier is another model which we call as the job characteristics model. And Herzberg's model and job characteristics model, these are models of job design, and in this model we find that the identification of job characteristics have been emphasized, and so the 5 job characteristics and their relationships to personal and work outcomes are emphasized. So, here the skill variety, task identity, task significance, autonomy and feedback, these are the job characteristics which have been emphasized by researchers and thinkers. In fact, one of the formulations have also been developed of the MPS, the motivating potential score, for which I have not made any presentation for you, but MPS is motivating potential score, where we have skill plus skill variety plus task identity plus task significance, the average of that, average of all this. So, we add all these and then multiply by the autonomy and feedback. The idea is that autonomy and feedback have the multiplicative quality, so they are more important perhaps in the work situation. So, the job characteristics model has talked about motivating potential score of a job, which this we will discuss when we are doing our chapter on work motivation again. I have just tried to put these the meaning of all these for you. Maybe you are interested. Skill variety, for example, let us see. Skill variety is the degree to which a job requires a variety of different activities. Task identity, yes, refers to the degree to which the job requires completion of a whole identifiable piece of work. Task identity, you identify yourself with that the duties of the task. So, the completion of a whole task that is given to you. Then the significance of task significance and task autonomy. The autonomy, the degree to which the job provides substantial freedom and discretion to the individual in scheduling the work and in determining the procedures to be used in carrying it out. The autonomy at the place of work. So, as managers we have to be very careful about it, that people also need some autonomy while they are doing their duties and their work. So, autonomy becomes extremely important, and as we have seen that autonomy and feedback have to be multiplied if we are looking at the motivating potential score of a particular job, then feedback is extremely important, which refers to the degree to which carrying out the work activities required by a job results in the individual obtaining direct and clear information about the effectiveness of his or her performance. Feedback, that means you can say in a way it is a knowledge of result, in a way that whatever you have done, is it all right, is it good, is it bad, do you need an improvement, that has great motivating potential. Otherwise, you do the work and you do not know where do I stand, what your manager wants. So, as a manager you have to see that you are able to give very good feedback to your employees or your juniors or your subordinates, because that has motivating potential. You will be liked as a manager if you are very positive in giving feedback. Even the negative things you can put in a very positive way. So, feedback becomes extremely important for improvement of work performance of any employee, and that has motivation potential, yes. But how do we go about it? Perhaps you need an excellent training in leadership or communication, yes. So, now I move on to do you recollect what are we doing in these lectures? I am trying to acquaint you to the concepts of management, which in each chapter perhaps these concepts will appear in all these concepts will appear in some chapter or the other, in some reference or the other. Now, let us see leadership. Leadership is the process of inspiring others to work hard to accomplish important tasks. We all have the concept of leadership in our mind. We all know that there had been leaders in the history, there are leaders, but a manager should also be a leader. That is the idea. So, when we are going to discuss leadership, we will have more ideas on leadership, but a few ideas I would like to certainly give you by acquainting you with the concepts. The transactional leadership, there are different types of leadership, but some of the ideas which have come up in the recent years. Transactional leadership is that leadership which directs the efforts of the others through tasks, reward and structure. Which directs through the tasks, rewards and structure. So, there is a transaction between people. It is not an autocratic leadership where perhaps the transaction goes only from one side and the command and that is it. In transactional we have transaction from both the sides. Then transformational leadership, where we are trying to transform, we are leading, yet there is a transformation process. This is the ability of a leader to get people to do more than they originally expected to do in support of large scale innovation and change. And so, we are trying to transform the issue or the relationship from wherever it was to a slightly different level. Okay. If it was A, then perhaps A dash, you have a different kind. Coming to the managerial competency, we define it as a skill or personal characteristics that contribute to high performance in a management job. Well, I am using the term define, but sometimes I am describing also. Main idea is that I am trying to acquaint you to management concepts. I am presenting a scenario of management concepts. Okay, so I am often using the word define, but sometimes I am defining or describing. Okay, because for certain concepts sometimes a perfect definition may or may not be available, but description of the process may be available. So when I am using these words, I am sometimes using it interchangeably, so keep that in mind. So after managerial competency, we are moving on to workforce diversity. Workforce diversity, we know that workforce is diverse, and managers have to keep themselves ready to actually meet with this challenge. So this term becomes important in today's context. This is a term used to describe demographic differences such as age, gender, race, ethnic groups, able bodied or we can say handicapped people, okay, disabled people, among other members of workforce. And workforce diversity, of course, the other side of workforce diversity is also about different race and different country and different perhaps religion. So in workforce diversity also these issues come, and the people from different countries, and these days with globalization, as we know that people from different countries, different race, different religion, different gender, they are all working together, and so the concept becomes extremely important in today's time. Then from here I move to organizational effectiveness. In our introduction, we have talked about one of the major goals of learning about management as a subject is to have the best quality, total quality management, and finally we have the competitive advantage and effective organizations. So effective organization we are defined as a capacity to survive, adopt, maintain itself and grow regardless of a particular function it fulfills. So organizations may be of many types, which we will see later in our lectures, and when we say an effective organization, then whatever be our final product or final function, final task, we have to survive, grow, adopt, maintain, and perhaps be alive in the today's competitive environment. So that is the effectiveness. So when we are talking about effectiveness and productivity of an organization, we are not talking about productivity in a particular year or particular slice of time. We are talking about organizational performance. If you draw the graph, the performance must be consistent and perhaps growing. Okay, so it is not the slice of time that only say the year 2005 the organization made this much profit and something of that kind, so it is very effective. No, that is just one parameter of that particular year, but we have to grow, we have to survive, we have to maintain, and we have to really renew ourselves. So organizational effectiveness is a total process which is talking about so many things. Profit is just one of the things in organizational effectiveness. Here we are making that distinction with certain other points of views. And so from here we move on to some other concepts. We will now see the concept of industrial relations. Industrial relations is the field, one of the important fields in management, and that looks at relationship between management and workers, particularly workers, union and organizations. We talk about industrial relations also in terms of some aspects like a discipline which is committed to a policy advocating a secure, safe and fair and good quality at the place of work. This in turn creates a balance between employees and employers of the organization. I should have written here employers. Creates a balance between employees and employers of the organization. So, you understand that in the industrial relations concept, we have number of factors where we are talking about issues of participative management and so on. Activity based management uses detailed economic analysis of important business activities to improve strategic and operational decisions. It increases the accuracy of cost information by more precisely linking overhead and other indirect costs using bases such as direct labor hours, machine hours and the material costs. Yeah, we are talking about a combination of these costs to optimize the performance results of the organization. Then we come to organization development, popularly known as OD. Bennis, one of the authorities in this field, he defined OD as a response. Well, there are many definitions, but well, I picked up Bennis. Defined OD as a response to change a complex, and this is a complex educational strategy intended to change beliefs, attitudes, values and structure of organizations so that they can better adapt to new technologies, market and challenges and seeing the rate of change itself. When we are talking about feedback, a term which has become very popular these days is 360 degrees feedback, and this refers to, in fact, this is also known as a multi-rater feedback. And multi-rater feedback in the earlier years, when we were talking about this, for example, when I conducted this study some 25 years ago, at that time the multi-rater feedback concept that we had taken was that there are supervisor, immediate supervisor or your say co-worker, something of that multi-rater, or the chief manager or something of that kind. But now the 360 feedback, this is taking multi-source feedback, and this multi-source assessment is done through the employee development feedback that comes from all around the employee. That means everyone or most of the people in the organization, those who could perhaps give feedback about yourself will give feedback, not each and every, but maybe in your department, your colleagues and others. So, the feedback would come from subordinates, peers and managers in the organizational hierarchy, as well as assessment, and in some cases external sources and the customers and suppliers or all others interested stakeholders might also give you feedback, which could be about performance in terms of any aspect of the organization or of the person. So, this is one of the I will say new methods of analyzing performance feedback in organizations for effective management system. Then we are talking about well, industrial relations we have already discussed. Let me just see whether I can. So, we have talked about so many concepts in this these 3 lectures, and this has given you fairly good idea about certain concepts of management. Now, during the course, the whole course that we are going to discuss, in each chapter you will find that some reference to these concepts will be seen. So, I close here, and we move on to different chapters, and then you will find that once again the reference to some of these concepts will emerge. I hope now this has given you some idea about the scenario of management that we have today as part of the academic study or as part of your training, and then we move on to the other topics. Okay, that is it for today.